Hey, everybody, it's Max. So I have a treat for you today. I haven't done a phone a friend in like a really long time. We've been busy making Midas Touch videos, UNFTR videos, adding more progressive resources to the website at unftr.com, the newsletters, of course, and then getting On the Record off the ground. But a lot of the stories that we've done lately are starting to synthesize. They're starting to intersect. So we've been working a lot, of course, on the Treasury, on US debt, the Federal Reserve, the moves that they're going to make to try and stabilize the economy, what's happening with the economy generally. And then we did our big stablecoin features. So we did a couple of really deep dives and investigations into the burgeoning cryptocurrency landscape and its intersection with the political class. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes and some stuff out in the open that we really need to talk about and think about. So in my learning journey, I ingested dozens of white papers and I interviewed some people. I read a ton of information and I watched some creators out there on YouTube and in other places to try and get a feel for industry speak and kind of how people were thinking about this moment. One of the creators that I found, I shouted out a few weeks ago and On the Record. His name is Keith D. And what I liked about his presentation was that he wasn't preaching and he wasn't selling. He was teaching. He's a natural-born teacher and a gifted instructor. And so when I shouted him out and On the Record, I pinged him and said, hey, just want you to know I covered you. I think you're doing a great job. And he got back to me right away. And it started a dialogue that's kind of turned into a friendship and one that I really appreciate. This is a super smart guy who's in it for the right reasons. And the reason I like him is because, yes, he's a great teacher, but he sees it from the technological and inevitable technological perspective, but he also understands the macro overlay and what this means for the world, the dangers that are inherent in it, the opportunities that exist, and just a really good general framework for it. So I was excited to bring him on the show, and I asked him the last time we spoke, I said, would you be willing to speak to our audience about this? And he said, absolutely, because again, natural-born teacher. So what you're about to be treated to is a discussion between me and Keith D. The only thing I ask, if you're into this stuff and you sit through the presentation, is that you give him a sub at the end of this, because genuine, authentic creators that are in it for the right reasons are hard to find. And when you suss one out like this, you want to support him. Now, it should be clear. I think when I first started talking to him, he had fewer subs than I did. And now he has more because this guy's taking off like a rocket ship. But it is so well deserved. So if you like this conversation and you enjoy the back and forth that we have, my only ask is that you give him a sub at the end of this. Now, my conversation with Keith D. UNFTR. Keith D, we're doing this. We're together.
Let's do it, man. Super excited about it.
So as I mentioned in the introduction, I happened across your channel when I was doing research on a stablecoin piece for UNFTR. And the first thing that caught my eye was I saw Piketty's Capital in the back. And I was like, what's happening here? Why is a crypto bro sitting there with a Thomas Piketty book? And then I was like, all right, let me give this a shot. And then I was like 3 videos into it in one of those oh my God, I got to go to bed. Like, this is ridiculous. I was in one of those late night rabbit holes. And I'm going to start with a compliment. And because it's something my audience has heard me say before, you're a great teacher. Like, you're a great teacher. You're a very patient, very accessible, and very kind teacher. I even got a chance to hang on one of your live streams lately. And the way that you interact with your audience, it's very generous. It's very authentic. And I think that's why your channel is exploding in the way it is because you're just real. You're great. But you're a really good teacher. So I just wanted to say thank you, first of all, because you helped open my eyes to a few things and I was able to incorporate it into my reporting. And that's what I love about this creator universe, is that everybody is just so willing to share and, to explore these things together, because some of them are really tricky.
Well, thanks. That's probably the best compliment that I could receive, because that's the goal, is to teach. So thanks.
All right. So let's start with I have a million questions, and we've done a little pre-interview on this. So I know you're probably already rolling your eyes like he's, oh boy, here he comes. But I do want to talk about your personal journey, because again, you occupy an interesting part of the online quote unquote crypto universe in that you're actually not a crypto bro. You are a genuine teacher. You're also an investor, and you have a keen sense of technology, but also a general idea of like where this all fits in the broader economic landscape. And that's what I found so interesting about your tutorials and your teachings. So just if you could bring us into your mindset and your journey, and I guess how you got started, and how you became this guy who's now teaching thousands and thousands of us.
Oh, wow. I didn't think we would get to go into some of this. Okay, cool. Um, so truth is, it started for me in high school. I was obsessed with trying to find a way to one, uh, make sure that my parents were getting a good ROI because they were doing a lot for me, and I recognized that, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to do something to like pay them back in some sort of a way. And so recognizing that I was being afforded a lot of unique opportunities and was around a lot of unique people, I was very about my, uh, I was very intentional about that. So I would talk to my friends' parents and ask them questions about how they started businesses and things of that nature. Mind you, by the time I was getting into high school, I was playing around on the internet, learning about e-commerce and affiliate marketing, and I was running stores. Um, and so, anyways, in that started learning a little bit about the internet, how that works, pay per click marketing, meaning like Facebook and Google, you pay them and they give you attention and traffic. And so, by the time I was graduating from high school, a really good friend of mine actually interned at a venture capital firm. And one day he was talking to me about this thing called Ethereum. And this was 2017. And he said, hey, uh, it sounds like the founder of this thing died today. And I was like, oh, okay. And we looked at the price and it had gone down a bunch. And by the way, this was false. So another lesson in the internet is a lot of false information spreads rapidly. Um, and that can affect markets, and especially when markets are very early like that. So, anyways, um, he seemed to not really care that much. But I was like, wait a minute, we had heard about Bitcoin before and like we had used it before for, little things, whatever you do in high school. And I was like, wait a minute, if there's an Ethereum, then that means that there's like a whole class of things that is occurring here, right? There's not just a Bitcoin, there's also another one. Okay, what is this? Started going really deep down that rabbit hole 2017 till 2020. And 2020, I started working professionally in the space, was at the frontier of what was occurring in uh, decentralized finance, where essentially there were some people that were taking real world assets that were generating income. These were cars, car loans that someone owned, and they were paying out the yield from them on chain. Now, the SEC didn't like that.
Hmm.
I ended up getting away from them right before the SEC expressed that they didn't like that. And very ironically, I actually ended up at the security token group where we were actually using the regulations to help companies take securities and bring them on chain. And so I spent about a year doing that, not too long. And I was fascinated with like, okay, the securities industry and like the regulated side of finance. So I went completely backwards to where I was um, deep in the crypto thing to right in between to all the way becoming a licensed investment broker for some time,
Mm.
learning a little bit more about like how companies raise capital, what private equity companies actually do, and capital formation from that perspective. And so, anyways, that was kind of my journey through crypto was actually backwards. And then I was like, okay, I need to. Throughout all of this, I was like going to high schools, like talking to kids about crypto because my thing about the whole thing is if there's only 21 million Bitcoin that will ever exist, as an example, and the demand for that asset continues to rise, then fixed supply, rising demand, only one thing that can really happen to the price, it's going to go up. And no one's paying attention to this. So if this is the future and if this is a thing, then 99% of the population has no idea that it's occurring and won't have a fleeting chance to be able to participate. So I felt a responsibility to go and do my best to like go into high schools and just see the ideas of like, hey, there's this thing going on. And I can also teach about monetary history and what is money and get kids thinking about that stuff as well because you don't teach that in school. So, anyways,
Mm.
that was kind of where the whole education thing started, and I realized I wasn't doing that enough, and then 3.5 months ago, I started a YouTube channel.
I feel like that last little piece was is really important, but it was very condensed. So, um, translating this from a a vocation into a public learning journey is kind of different. So, like, how do you approach the development of your content? So, are you would you frame yourself as a topical creator, a long form creator? Like, where what space do you want to occupy? And for I get mind you a lot of feedback on the crypto pieces that we've done, and many of the listeners will say, or many of the viewers will say, who do I trust? Where do I go? Am I supposed to be doing something here? I don't like this is interesting to learn about, but I don't understand what's my role? Am I going to be left behind or worse? Is this going to tank everything and just leave crypto people with all the money? Is my money going to so many questions abound because it's still a mystery as mature as this marketplace is getting. So, how do you want people that are in my universe to view you as a guide in this space? How should they interact with you and your content?
Yeah. So, first, I've run a survey. I've got about 500 responses. One of the major themes is I don't know who to trust.
Mm,
And the funny thing about my content, Max, is that like I didn't necessarily come into this to like be a crypto creator. Um, my first videos weren't about crypto at all. In fact, when my channel started to take off, it there was no crypto. Um, but I realized that there was an opportunity for sure to kind of bring people a more balanced approach, right? So the initial motto of my channel was uh, combining modern science and ancient wisdom to live a better life. And so that's kind of the approach that I still am like taking as the underlying
hmm,
thread of like, why are we even participating in this stuff at all? Or should we be? Right. Depending upon what your goals are in life. And so as I get back toward that kind of content, the idea here is having a place to look at the facts of what's actually occurring and in a way that's digestible. Um, right. All this jargon, all these words, all these terms. What does this stuff mean? Why does crypto actually matter? How does it actually work? And should I buy it or not?
mhm.
um, those are the questions
Which
that
gets
I
into
would
the
like to
same
answer.
old investment analyst sort of landscape of like what's your investment profile? What are your goals? What's your horizon? What are you playing with? How much do you want to risk? All that's is really sort of the same framework, right? But just with a new asset class.
Exactly. And the only nuance really in that discussion is the volatility,
Hmm.
because that brings so much more of the need for the psychological management of it.
Yeah.
Because you've got these huge price runs that change people's lives. I've experienced it myself, and then take it all back.
Yeah. So my entry point into I was writing about politics for a while, and the reason that I sort of migrated into economics and then landed on the very sort of obvious alchemy of that in socioeconomics was actually the oil spike crisis in 2008. There was or 2009. So nope, it was 2008. So there was this moment when oil reached $147 a barrel, and it was right as the economy was collapsing. So the obvious like warning signs that were going off is this isn't related to supply and demand. This is artificial. If the economy is collapsing, oil shouldn't be spiking through the if anything it should be going the other way. What's going on here? And that brought me into the commodities world. What's so interesting to fast forward to to this moment is that crypto is a commodity, maybe. It's also a security, possibly. It's also a currency sometimes, uh, but it's also a tech. When we're saying crypto broadly, it's a technological framework because I think blockchain and crypto have now become sort of like one and the same because centralized, decentralized, or whatever, you have to have some sort of understanding of the technological framework. Like you and I can pass money back and forth to one another without having to understand what the Swift system is, right? But like you should have some sort of an idea. Like if I'm going to pass you, some cryptocurrency, like where's that going? If it's like I remember marveling at a fax machine when I saw it in the 1980s for the first time. I was like, wow. So they just did that on their side, and it came out, huh? That's something else. Like to me, it's like everything is a technological marvel. But here we are at this intersection of is it a commodity? Is it a security? Is it money? Is it technology? Like, what is this thing? So, like, when you're approaching people or people are approaching you for the first time and it's totally greenfield to them, it's just a total blue sky opportunity. And they say, just give me the elevator speech of like, how am I supposed to be? What is this thing that we're talking about? Where do you start people on that journey? Because that entry point, I find it very difficult to find a common entry point for people.
And I think it's always going to be different for each person. One of the cool things about this technology is that it is an accumulation of many different things and topics and interests. And so because of that, there's going to be a different entry point for everyone. But the thing that I like to always kind of start off with is thinking about how the system that we have works today regarding how money comes into existence. And the primary way that that is occurring is through the Treasury of the United States issuing bonds, right? And when they issue these bonds, they're essentially raising money from either the public or from the Fed as the Fed buys these bonds. And in that, there's money being created as the Fed, for instance, would buy bonds from the Treasury. There's new money coming into circulation from that. Now, we have no say in that process besides through really with the Fed. We don't really have any say in what happens with the Fed. It's a private organization. And so, and with the Treasury, we can hire officials that can uh, pass programs that lead to this new creation of money through raising bonds for the programs that they want to fund. Now, the issue that can come with that is that all of the money that we have today is based upon a debt system. In 1970s, we detached from the gold standard. So money became backed by nothing. This is something I'm sure all of your viewers understand. But when that occurred, we entered into a fiat world, fiat meaning in Latin, let it be so.
Mhm.
And so the money that we have today is at the hands of people that we don't necessarily have any control over. And so, with that being the case, with the inflation target of the Fed being 2%, right? There's a mandate from the Fed to keep steady inflation, meaning that the debasement of your money is a mandate from the Fed. So your dollars buy less and less every year. Now,
Mm.
Bitcoin, it was not out of nowhere. It actually was released right at the beginning of 2009, right after the financial crisis, right after the governments of the world had bailed out uh, all of these companies and whatnot. In the United States, we bailed out our industries and banks. And so, with that occurring, once again, we saw this flood of money into the system. None of that money went to the people, it all went to the corporations. And this was a direct response to that occurring.
Mm.
Now, it wasn't a direct response that came right then because Bitcoin was very well thought out and it had to have been designed for years before that. Okay. So the trend started in 1971. No more real money. The next question was, okay, but what's next? Okay. And digital was already becoming a thing in the 90s as well. And if you listen to Peter Thiel, he actually pretty much outlined Bitcoin in the 90s.
Oh, we don't say his name out loud on this channel.
Oh,
You'll have to come up with a euphemism or another name for him.
the the self-proclaimed antichrist, I think, is what he is now.
Now we're talking. There we go.
um, that guy, he in the 90s very well outlined this thing called Bitcoin, and it ended up happening, a couple decades later, a decade later. Anyways, um, Bitcoin is a network first and foremost of computers, but it is also a monetary network where you can send value from one place in the world to another without any intermediary, meaning no central bank and no commercial bank in between that process. And so that's the first use case that you have, is being able to send money without an intermediary. Now, the other important part of this is the inflationary mechanism. How does this Bitcoin come into circulation? The Bitcoin comes into circulation through a process called mining. And the reason that, uh, let me back up. So there's only 21 million Bitcoin that will ever exist. And the
I
way
have
that
a
that
question
works,
about that. So we're going to
okay,
put a pin in that, but
okay,
yeah, keep going.
21 million Bitcoin that will ever exist. And the idea being that the Bitcoin that's coming into circulation is on a disinflationary schedule. So in the fiat world, infinite money, there's no end to how much money that can be printed. In the Bitcoin world, there's an end to it, and the amount that comes into circulation is on a set schedule. And that set schedule is that every 4 years or so, the amount of Bitcoin that can come into circulation will be cut in half. This is the halving that you hear about in crypto. Now, 2140 is the year that all of the Bitcoin will be mined. What happens then? We have no idea. But
Right.
for now, there is this disinflationary schedule of the Bitcoin coming out into circulation that serves as, I'll wrap up here, that serves as it can essentially create a vacuum for what happens because we have this digitally provably scarce thing,
Yeah.
and you have infinite fiat money printing all around it. So if I'm an investor or a risk taker, and for instance, in 2020, when money is free, for instance, or it doesn't mean anything, and I have to take risk, where am I going to put my money? I'm going to put my money in a thing that is as hard as money can get in a digital first world. And that's kind of what Bitcoin offers, is a provably scarce asset and network that not only has the properties of money in that it is durable, divisible, portable, fungible, but also has utility. Because if I live in Venezuela and I want to protect my purchasing power, but I can't get my hands on dollars, I'm going to buy Bitcoin. And that's where it started. And then you get to stable coins, but I'll step back from there.
Okay. So when we were talking earlier, I gave you sort of a thesis statement that I'd like you to build on. And so we're going to go back to some of the economic foundations of the work that we do on this channel. The intersection for us of the democratic order that the world was trending to and where we are today has its roots in that very same era, with depegging from the dollar as sort of the center point. So we've talked about that moment a lot on this channel because it, in many ways, that was the temptation, the dangerous waters that we were able to wade into, made it then a political choice of like, how are we going to manage this new era now that we have completely thrown chaos into the mix, and kind of abused this idea that we're the world's reserve currency, because with that notion came a tremendous responsibility and faith in the folks at the Bretton Woods conference that we would behave a certain way. So I would argue that we have completely abrogated that responsibility. In fact, that's is sort of like this central thesis of this channel. But the guys that were talking at the time, what I find interesting about the growth of crypto today is that the Mont Pelerin Society was the home for the Austrian tradition economists that were breaking against Keynesian traditions prior to that, because they believed in a monetary first solution and very few fiscal interventions into economic matters. They did not believe in big social safety nets. They didn't believe in over policing of economic matters or even social matters, immigration, and things like that. These were the true free market ideologues that created this so called neoliberal system that we wound up operating under, although a perverted version of it. The guy who sat at the center of it was Friedrich Hayek. He was really the he was really the heart and the soul. And if you look at some of the forums of true crypto enthusiasts, they will talk about Hayek's theory of the denationalization of money, basically setting currency free, that currency should be private and not be in institutional hands because the market will be able to determine a better value for it. That is a staggering and wholly hypothetical, theoretical proposition about how money should be ordered in a hyper nationalistic society. But he was kind of the guy that said it. They modeled a lot of things after it. And what I find fascinating is here we are today at this moment where you have people on the outside of the crypto world, and I would consider myself one of them, looking in and seeing this weird inflection point in this industry that you know 1,000 times more about than I do, of enthusiasts that believe in the nature of a free crypto universe where the power of purchasing and supply and demand is in the hands of the people. It's on this ledger that cannot be manipulated by any government entity. This is free and it's for us. And the intersection of now the institutionalization and the frameworks being created by those same government entities around this thing that was designed to be free. But you had thoughts on how real maybe the origin story really was here. So if you can reflect on this particular moment of governments and financial institutions and multinational corporations now putting their hands around this thing and changing it, are they? Or was this sort of the way it was always destined to be?
I appreciate the question and the setup. The reality of how Bitcoin, when it came out, the only people that knew about Bitcoin when it was released were these like hackers and like uh, crypto punks and these people who were privacy first people on the internet in their little forums. And that was the original seedings of like who were the people to promote and invest in Bitcoin. It was privacy first, uh, libertarianism, like free the money, free the system.
Mm.
This is where we want to be. Um, they were the ones, they were the evangelists. They were the ones who spread the word about Bitcoin. Now, where Bitcoin came from is de facto a mystery.
It kills me. It just does.
And a lot of people in that world, they saw that as um, a feature.
Mm.
Someone like myself, I see it as the potential for a bug. Okay. Because if we don't know, then that is a risk. So, anyways, the idea that cryptocurrency and Bitcoin was invented as a way to um, denationalize money is the story that is told, and that is the underlying theme of why someone should own Bitcoin, especially for the maximalists. You have Bitcoin maximalists, meaning they believe that Bitcoin is the only real cryptocurrency that matters,
Mm.
and it serves as that role, as this rebellion against the current monetary system.
Mm.
Now, so for me, for someone like myself, who in 2017, I never looked at it that way, but that's also because Ethereum and all this other stuff already existed. So the way that I always saw Bitcoin was that it was a primitive version of blockchain and distributed ledger technology that potentially was meant to be the thing that gets people to adopt the technology underlying it.
Mm. Mm.
And so, and this is funny because
Oh,
Tucker,
that's all right. That's interesting. Okay. Okay. I'm wrapping my head around that. Go ahead. Go ahead.
fantastic. Funny enough, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this guy's name either, but
Your universe is so weird, man. It's all right. It's all right.
Tucker Carlson.
Oh,
Okay, he
no,
came
you're
out.
not. Unless you say fucker Tarlson. That's how we pronounce it here. Sorry.
He came out this week and he said that he believes that cryptocurrency came from the CIA. And now he's not the first person to say this.
Well, his dad came from the CIA, so maybe
Yeah,
he has some agency there, right?
there we go.
Yeah.
There we go. Let's give him some something. And I released a video very much so along the lines of this a while ago. And the truth is that once again, we don't know where it came from. What we do know is that the internet was born out of DARPA, which was a military project in the United States during the Cold War, where we were essentially piecing together cryptography as a way to communicate amongst one another without having our adversaries know what was going on. Okay, so modern cryptography, in that sense, that was what was being born in that time. A lot of these standards, for instance, the SHA-256 algorithm, which is just an encryption standard, was born in that era, and it is the number one thing that Bitcoin is based upon is SHA-256, this hashing algorithm. And so you have modern cryptography, the internet itself being a network that was created to be able to withstand a nuclear attack. That was what was happening in the 90s with the internet. They were trying to create a network that could withstand a nuclear attack. And my argument is that would it really be all that crazy to think that Bitcoin becomes the evolution of that same system, of that same thought process
Right.
for money and
Right.
not just information?
Right. Because money at this point is just on ledgers.
Mhm.
Like the money, we don't have the same relationship with money today as we used to at all. It's a completely different thing. So you brought up something that has been sticking in my ass sideways like a chicken bone, as they say. And I don't know who says that anymore, but I still say it. And that is, I saw somebody interviewed who who left crypto as though they were leaving the church, right? And this dude was saying, like, he's like, look, I had this weird epiphany when I was thinking about the scarcity of Bitcoin, about the finite aspect of Bitcoin, and ergo its currency value proposition, right? And he said, and the last Bitcoin's going to be mined in, what is it, 2040, 2140, 2040,
2140.
2140. He goes, and then I said, according to who? He's like, and I was like, like, says who? How do, what if it's not? And then the whole sort of underlying theory just sort of implodes. He's like, and then I started thinking about, do we really want a system where no one is actually in charge and everyone's in charge? And he said, and I sort of, everything that brought me into it at the same time began to unravel from that single notion of says who.
Okay.
I don't, there's no question there that I have because it's such an ephemeral type thing to talk about. But like, can you just respond to that
Yes.
idea of why somebody would leave crypto like they're leaving the church?
Well, leaving crypto would be like leaving the church for sure. You would have to have some revelation. um, and so on this idea of like who says who, well, technically says anyone who's the people who are participating in governing the network, which is anyone who's running a node or
Mhm.
who is running the Bitcoin software. So this is an important point of like how crypto or Bitcoin rather works, because there are all of these different computers around the world that are running this software. It's open source software. You and I can go and download it and we can run it on our computer or on a ASIC, which is a mining computer that's specifically designed for that. Now, those mining computers, right? These people are essentially in control of what happens with the network. And now, in order to change the network, the only way for the network to change is for 51% of the network to agree upon what change we want to make. So technically, it's upon the entire organization of the entire network to come up with whether or not we want to change the rules. Okay. So uh, technically says who says the people, if you may. Um, Now, what ends up happening, and this is the truth about Bitcoin, is that these nodes and or miners can end up being concentrated, and that can be they are.
Mm,
Um, so you got the big mining facilities in Texas.
mhm.
China has the same thing.
Yep.
And, if we paid close attention, like governments kind of like pushed that a little bit. Um, and anyways, point being, technically it's up to the participants of the network And the idea is that Bitcoin is decentralized enough that no one party could actually take over 51% of the network and make those changes without the agreement of everyone else.
Okay. Um, all right. So we spent a good deal of time talking about Bitcoin as, and again, deservedly so, is chief among its peers, right? But the entire, but the system is evolving now, and so now we're entering a new era of stable coins and a new global monetary order potentially, and that's where our reporting sort of picked up on, is because we're looking at what's happening with treasury auctions. Who's buying the treasuries? Who's standing on the other side? Like, who are our counterparties out in the world that are actually purchasing our debt? And as you so elegantly stated in the beginning, allowing us to live in this fiat world. Um, and it was a curious thing to me to see that at the time of the reporting, that if you bundled all the stablecoin purchases of our treasuries together, it would be the, I think, 18th largest buyer of U.S. debt. And the pinpoint that we used for that was from I can't remember which article it was from, but it was basically saying like, and under that is Germany. So just to give you
Mhm.
an idea of
Nice.
like how robust this is. Now again, it's a network, but I think if you said to pretty much anybody, 99% of the population on the street, um, did you know that stable coins are the 18th largest purchaser of US? They'd be like, what? I'm late from, I got to catch my bus. Like, what are you even talking about? This is all gibberish, right? You are, I think, a very cautious, very rational observer and participant of this burgeoning marketplace. And I have yet to detect any sort of ideological underpinning or political persuasion in any of your videos. So, first of all, congratulations. It's
Mhm.
very hard to do in this world. It's also why I trust you. I don't trust anybody that either doesn't love the thing that they're talking about and wants to genuinely teach people about it, or if you don't pick a lane, if you're in political reporting. If you're just a down the middle person, I don't trust you. Have your lane, because now I know you're researching it, right? Long story short, you do come at this, I think, from a very pragmatic and non-ideological way. And I think that's the way that we need to view this, because this is now suddenly, this is going to be how the world operates. So I'm asking you, without revealing any sort of like sort of political feelings about this, your sense of what the community generally is thinking about the evolution of stable coins, and where are the gaps, the dangers, and the potential fail points that we should be thinking about and looking toward as this matures and becomes more integrated with our system.
Now, the way that you've set this up is actually fascinating to me because, like, I think we need to have a little bit of a back and forth here because the thing that in the crypto space everyone is extremely afraid of is this idea of a central bank digital currency, right? Where the public is involved in administering this kind of a technology. But there's a potential here, and you know, we can be as political as you'd like. You're saying that maybe that is what you'd want, is to have the Federal Reserve actually be responsible for administering this kind of technology, so that the profits from it all doesn't fall into the hands of private actors.
Yes.
Is that okay? Very interesting.
Okay. So the backdrop to this is, right now we have no clarity on it because the government shut down and they're really not advancing any meaningful legislation in this moment, right? But coming out of the summer session, there's a trio of legislation. One is passed, House and Senate. It's done. That was the Genius Act. Then we have the Clarity Act, which passed the House but hasn't passed the Senate, and gives me the willies right off the bat, because the person carrying the water for it in the Senate is Ted Cruz. And to me, that's enough to be like, oh, I'm afraid. Um, and then there's the Anti CBDC Surveillance State Act. That's the third part of it that hasn't passed either chamber, because that's where people are like, wait, what are we doing? So, Genius Act, I'm on board with. We need to put some clarity around what this thing is and how it interacts in the system, and that's fine. What the Clarity Act does in conjunction with the Genius Act is it basically takes it out of the regulatory purview of the SEC and puts it in the hands of the CFTC. That's the same agency that's essentially responsible for the lack of oversight that led to the housing collapse. And I would argue is also the agency that has provided a lack of oversight over the private credit markets right now, that it will lead to the next financial collapse, which is imminent. That's just me. So I don't love that at all. The Anti CBDC Surveillance State Act says that this should be in private hands, not public hands. The problem with that is that our president now has a stable coin built on very robust technology with some very serious partners, one of whom was just pardoned today by the president. So we can talk about that. CZ is now officially pardoned and free to just run loose all over the globe except for China.
Crazy timing, by
It's
the way.
crazy timing.
A week after they have had this entire manipulation scandal around them where they've participated in the liquidation of over $1 billion-ish, I believe, of users' funds because of their own technical error. So just wanted to say that. Sorry.
Who was that? Binance?
Yeah, Binance. Binance
Tell
played
me
a
about, wait,
really big role
what
in what
happened?
just happened. Okay, so in the crypto world, there was this massive liquidation that happened a couple of weeks ago, October 10th, when Mr. President in the United States came out and he said, we're doing 100% tariffs on China or whatever it was. And in that moment, very quickly, there was around 19 plus billion dollars that was liquidated in the cryptocurrency market. Lots of highly leveraged traders in that space. And one of the major platforms where this occurred was on Binance.
Hmm.
And what happened was
Which is
that
not in China, right, Keith?
it's in Singapore.
It's in Singapore, right? Okay. And China has barred it, right? Or
Um,
do I have that
I don't know.
backwards?
I don't know. I don't know the intricacies of that. I
Okay.
mean,
I'm
Chinese
sorry,
people
continue.
participate in crypto, and the Chinese government has been very much so against it, but they still participate. Let's be clear.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, okay, it's pretty technical, but there was a stable coin that's an algorithmic synthetic stable coin that lost its peg on the Binance platform. Okay. And when that occurred, there were a bunch of people who were using that stablecoin as the collateral for their positions.
Sure.
And so when the collateral gets cut in half for no real reason other than a technical error, billions of dollars gets liquidated at one time.
It's not supposed to be able to lose a peg like that. That's
And this goes into the different types of stablecoins too. So there's a whole crypto side of this because where did the price of the stablecoin come from? How could it have lost its peg only on Binance?
right.
And it's because Binance was using a price feed that came internally from their own systems. But in crypto, if you're going to use a synthetic stablecoin, especially, that price needs to be coming from different places. Okay. And that's called an Oracle solution that you can use to get the data to come from other places into one and know that it's true because I've got multiple sources checking it for me.
So just to translate this, because this is I was unaware of this, and this is a really important moment. A stable coin, the whole purpose of it is that it carries a value, in theory, 1-to-1 in the marketplace so that you know that this represents whatever the actual value represents in the market. So if one stable coin equals $1, it actually holds that US dollar treasury on the ledger somewhere. It actually has to buy that. If it is a combination of a US dollar, gold, silver, and yuan, which could be a new invention that comes up, it
will.
actually has to go purchase that yuan, that gold, right? So what you're saying is what you're saying, that those external reconciliation feeds that represent that transaction on Binance, it was an internal feed was that treasury never purchased, or
Right.
did money just disappear?
So this is fantastic because we actually need to backpedal a little bit because what I'm talking about is a synthetic stablecoin that is blockchain native. Whereas with these other stablecoins that we're talking about, none of what I just said exists at all.
Oh,
There is
oh,
no reporting of what's actually
oh.
in the bank account. We have no idea. Only through a third party audit. And that's why the Genius Act was necessary. Because otherwise these stablecoin providers could be just minting dollars out of nowhere.
Why would an why would an institutional investor, trader, trust a synthetic stablecoin when you have Tether, Circle, and even I'll put it out there, Donald Trump's USD1 stablecoin, which I'm just right because it's
So,
capitalized, it's usable, and it owns treasuries as a backstop. Why on earth
so,
would somebody use a synthetic one?
so the synthetic one would actually be a better option in this system that we're trying to describe. Because here's the thing: with Tether and Circle, we have no idea what's in their bank account. We have no idea. Whereas with a synthetic stablecoin, we could actually use a decentralized system to check what's backing the stablecoin
Why can't I know what's in Circle's bank account? Don't
because they don't tell you. Well, they report it, but these attestations come out once a month. So
oh
what's
God.
happening in between that month time?
Really?
Yeah. Like this is really important. This is
Yeah.
why the Genius Act had to be passed because, okay, to be clear, there are custodial stablecoins where you're trusting that someone else out there is buying treasuries to back them.
Yeah.
And then there are algorithmic stablecoins, which are backed out by things that are on chain, things that I can check and verify. Binance's problem was a Binance problem where they use an internal price feed for what was the price of that stablecoin. The stablecoin that was not on Binance did not depeg. Okay, but only on the Binance platform did it depeg. Okay. And
Wow.
so this is why once again we're like, oh, wow, all of a sudden he gets pardoned. Somebody, by the way, made a $200 million trade right as Mr. President in the United States made that announcement. And so there's like
Oh,
now today it's like, oh, so that's actually what just happened potentially.
wow.
So anyways.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay. Whew. So let's get back to the politicizing of this and the I guess the institutionalizing of these broader frameworks. In where's the downside risk to all of this? So now let's talk to Keith D, the advisor, somebody who's coming to you from let's not say it's an individual. Let's just say Barclays comes to you, they retain your services, and they say, Keith, tell us what we don't know. Give us our worst case scenario for how this is all evolving, and how would you advise us to think about this so that we can be in as stable as a framework as technologically possible today. Where would you look first for an actor like that?
Yeah. So I will actually start this by wrapping up the point about the stablecoins
Mhm.
because the problem with Tether, Circle, and these custodial stablecoins is that once again, we have no visibility into what is in their bank account. Now, the technology that I was just describing around the synthetic stablecoin or these oracles that feed the price in to the system so that you know because there's multiple parties checking and verifying that that information is true. That's called an oracle. That oracle solution is the most important piece of all of distributed ledger technology.
Now, to be clear, this is not the same as the company Oracle.
Very good. No, it is not at
Okay.
all. It's just the name of a technological solution, a decentralized oracle is what you
Okay.
call them. Great, great. Thank you for that. Um, and so in the future, these custodial stablecoins will be forced to do something like this, where the attestations happen in real time through these oracles, these decentralized oracles, okay, where there is a live price feed of what is in that bank account. That's the world that we're moving toward. Because if we don't have that, what is possible is how we get to this point, which it would suck if this is how we have to get there, is that we have a catastrophic event like what I just described
Yeah.
happening with like a tether,
Right.
okay, which would be $100 billion worth of issues. You know what I mean?
Maybe a lot more. Yeah.
And it could spread and become a much
Yeah.
bigger thing,
Yeah.
without a doubt.
Okay.
It could tank the entire crypto market, which could then have other impacts as well. And so, ideally, right, we don't have to go through that to get these types of solutions involved. But the entire world needs to get to the point to where inside of our financial system, we need to be checking each other to know whether or not there's collateral there for what it is that we're doing
Right.
leverage transactions on.
Right.
And this is what decentralized oracles create the opportunity for. And so the biggest risk is also the biggest opportunity. And I'll go ahead and say the name because they're in the White House, and it's a company called Chainlink. And what they're doing
Mm.
is providing the infrastructure to make everything that I'm talking about not even just possible, but they've been doing this for over a decade and they are way ahead out on what the future is going to look like when you can have verified information being used inside of every single financial transaction.
When you say they're in the White House, what does that mean?
Okay, in a couple of ways. So, literally, yesterday or 2 days ago, we had the Federal Reserve had a future of money discussion where Chainlink was present,
Mm.
as well as the report that the United States White House actually released a few months ago when they were talking about what they're going to do with their digital assets working group. Chainlink is in that report,
Mm.
and the need for oracles is in that report. Um, so in that sense, that's really what I mean. The Chainlink organization also works directly with the Depository Trust Clearing Corporation. They have run several pilots for many years, and in fact, are pretty much like doing things with them now. And also working with Swift very actively on the international scale to create this world where you can have verified information and you can, because of that, use the traditional rails for everything we're talking about on blockchains and create a whole new world of use cases. But that is a critical piece of, first off, creating the cracks in the systems that we have today, and then enabling this entire new future where we can trust the system again because the information is real and it's coming from counter parties that say, oh, okay, yeah, no, this is real because everyone's agreeing.
It's funny you mentioned Swift because I've been thinking about Swift in this context since we started doing these pieces. Is like they're the yellow pages that should have been Google. Like
Mhm.
if Swift should have been so far ahead of this, and I was actually in danger of being put out to pasture. But to your point, this week we put up a couple of pieces on what I consider to be a just a fucking bombshell report that came out from the Fed last week on the 15th, where they disclosed that SEC filings showed that hedge funds were understated in their treasury ownership from the tick data that comes out directly from the treasury, understated by $1.4 trillion. Yeah, that's a lot. So hedge funds registered to the Cayman Islands specifically own $1.85 trillion worth of short-term US treasuries. But the treasury has been claiming all along it's 400 billion, right? That type of reconciliation mistake doesn't just happen every day. What does it mean to be determined? What it shows is the complete and utter disconnect between multiple agencies. Again, the CFTC technically has some oversight into this world. The SEC,
Mhm.
because this Form PF data has to be sent back to them. But again, it gets back to that. They only have to report that monthly, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Which is insane in this day and age, right?
Mhm.
A disconnect between the Fed, who's supposed to have oversight in all this, and then the Treasury that is theoretically taking direct extracted data from the Treasury auctions to say who bought it. How do you miss $1.4 trillion in that mix? Because they were attributing it to stablecoins, China, Japan, all the way across the board. Everyone, all those counterparties reduced their exposure, but the Cayman Islands hedge funds increased their exposure. So they are now officially, according to the SEC and the Fed, the largest holder of our debt. What does that even mean? So when people push back against this industry, against blockchain technology, against true lineage on these platforms and understanding the origins and making sure that we can actually stand up the depository requirements and have a full disclosure on the blockchain of who owns what and where. This is like, to me, the most stressful period ever because it's like FTX just happened, right? What you just mentioned, I wasn't even aware of, literally just happened.
Mhm.
But as it is, these so-called mature and stable frameworks just underreported our treasury holdings by $1.4 trillion. They misattributed that much. So it's like, oh, don't go to this new system. Well, I got news for you. This old system ain't working. It's all
Mhm.
fucking broken because there's so much money out in the world that we're all somehow losing track of it all, which is a crazy thing to be able to contemplate. So I agree that it's not just inevitable, it's necessary. But what gives me chills, Keith, is that the I do innately trust bureaucratic endeavors more so than I trust private profit motivated endeavors. I will root for the career bureaucrat all day long over the so-called antichrist innovator who wants to set things free because I always call bullshit on their motives. And there has to be some sort of middle ground to this whole thing where we have full transparency but nobody has the ability to profit egregiously from the flow and velocity of these transactions, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Right?
It's simply not. I hear what you're saying. That is not where we're headed.
That's what I expected you to say. Yeah, man, that sucks. Oh boy.
Yeah, it's gonna be the exact opposite of that, and this is why
Yeah,
I feel it's so important to do what I'm doing. Because
100%.
if we're not participating, then we are absolutely being left behind. It's AI as well. It's not just this crypto thing. It's both. And people tell me, don't talk about AI and crypto in the same sentence, and I'm like, listen, they're both happening.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Okay. I've taken up a lot of your time. Let me just close on this if you don't mind. This world that we're in, this little ecosystem of, YouTubers and creators and all that it's filled, it's rife with charlatans. And I just want to come back to where I started with I've watched enough of you to know that you have a genuine curiosity that's short of enthusiasm, and that your reasons for doing this is to bring people into this inevitable place. Because people ask me all the time, what does this mean? What should I be scared? All those kind of things. And I think you do a really good job of that. So I have one request for unfuckers that tuned into this, and that is to sub to Keith's channel, because vetting the real ones out there from the people that are just doing it for the clicks is becoming sort of like an art form unto itself. This is so full disclosure. This is my third conversation with Keith. I take this space very seriously because I am very afraid of what it portends, but I know it's necessary. So when I give that stamp of approval, now he has more subs than me, so don't be clear. It's not like this guy needs it, but I'm telling you from a genuine, authentic place that we have to align with creators and teachers in this space that are doing this for the right reasons. And this is my third vetting and third conversation with Keith. And that's why I wanted to surface him for everybody here, because I do believe you're in this for really good, genuine curiosity reasons. And I appreciate the way that you go about this and the way that you teach. So that's my long winded thank you for doing this the way that you're doing it. And, I can't wait to see where you go. And I hope it's not our last conversation. I hope that we can actually revisit this.
oh man. Well, I thank you a ton. And the truth is that this kind of conversation and the rigor of it is something that is missing in my space, period. So I am very happy to find ways to continue these kinds of conversations because in my space, it's always blinders on. This is the future. Let's do it. And not enough of, okay, but how? And like, is there a way to do it that doesn't hurt other people as we do it? And so I'm actually I had such a great time having this conversation. I had to actually think. And that's something that I really enjoy.
Awesome. All right. Unfuckers, you know what to do. Go sub to Keep These channel. We got a bunch of new stuff coming up. We're tackling Venezuela soon. We're going to tackle the housing market. And if you haven't had a chance yet, definitely dig into the long form piece that we just did on all of what we're calling the explosive devices set around the economy for the controlled demolition of it. Spooky stuff, but again, knowledge is power. You got to know about it. Thank you to Keith D. Thank you everybody for tuning into this, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you, Max.
This is the story of a political pundit who looked at the world around him and just said, fuck it. Gives the middle finger to authority and says, kiss my ass. But instead of a revolution, he started a podcast. Just what the world needs. Started a podcast. Another basic white guy who started a podcast. But it's fun because he curses.